Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 10 of the Nerds of the North podcast. As always, I'm host number one, Matt, and joining me today, as always, is host number two.
Nick, and I guess my video's on. So
Yeah,
here's my face, everyone.
it's Nick.
Shocking.
Look at that beautiful bastard.
Thanks.
and
Yeah.
and with that, the world. I'm sure there is so much more going on, probably in media that we could be potentially aware of. But who cares? This is our podcast. We're talking about Star Wars: The Bad Batch, and in the first two episodes that came out for the series, and we might go on and talk about Star Wars, as I'm sure anyone who listens knows, is a rabbit hole of conversation. So we'll probably deviate a ton in that regard. But for the most part, we'll be focusing on the Bad Batch and how we feel about it, and some connections to the Clone Wars, things like that. But yeah, starting from there, Nick, what did you think of the first two episodes of this show?
Um, well, I think overall I enjoyed it quite a bit more than I was expecting to enjoy it, just based off of the first episodes of like the Clone Wars and Rebels and even Resistance. So I was actually pretty engaged pretty quickly
Mm-hmm.
by this show. I like the timeline it's set in personally. I think this setting hasn't really been explored by the lore too much as far as I'm aware yet, with the transition from the Republic to the Empire and what that kind of looked like for the clones.
Sure.
And I think, I mean, obviously we're going to see that play out more as the series continues, but it's really interesting seeing sort of a regime change and how that looks, because we're transitioning away from the clones to more I don't know military terms. I know you look at my face and see my chiseled jawline, but I'm not really a military guy. Um,
More of a military
but
force occupation versus
yeah, well, I was gonna say like more conscripted, if that's the right word. Like the army is,
oh yeah, sure,
yeah,
clones versus a yeah, people being
hmm
drafted or being able to
yeah,
volunteer to be part of the
yeah.
military.
And I don't really know. I think that might have been explored in the Solo movie a little bit, where like people volunteer to become part of that army, or I don't know if they're drafted or how that works exactly, but
Oh,
yeah, it's kind of
you're
interesting to see how that's happening in Grand Moff Tarkin, or Grandma Tarkin, as some people like to call him. Grandma Tarkin. He was obviously fact he played a big part in this episode, which
mhm.
it's kind of interesting how his appearance in the original Star Wars movie, like he's still in it. Like he's a big part of the storyline. It's interesting. And
Mhm.
he died in the first movie like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, maybe 50.
Right.
Man, I don't even know anymore. But yeah, like he was obviously a big part in Rogue One. He's in this one. But in general, like I know I discussed this with you before we got started, but I really like, even though all the main characters are straight up tropes, like there's no doubt about that. Like that's what they are. And but
Mhm.
I kind of like that about it, because like they're the game Broforce. So you got like, they're just like stereotypes. You got like the Rambo looking one, you got like the sharpshooter, you got like the big idiot, like strong one. You got like the nerdy one with the receding hairline and like the stupid goggles on his face. And I don't know, I kind of dig that kind of like stupid,
Mhm.
kind of like almost 80s action movie sort of aesthetic. And I get like almost like a heavy metal aesthetic, which it obviously is not heavy metal. It doesn't, besides the sci-fi setting, it doesn't have any
Yeah, sure,
commonality.
anything with it at
Yeah,
all. But
but I still kind of like, I kind of like that. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I was born in the 80s. I still have sort of like a I don't, that's really stupid, but that's some sort of like love of that aesthetic. But yeah. But that's my initial thought. I enjoyed it. I thought it was, especially the first episode, was really well paced. A lot of the times during these animated shows, I kind of find myself sort of drifting a little bit midway through the episode, but I didn't
mhm.
experience that one. I did the second episode, but the first one, which was 70 minutes long, I didn't at all. Like I was pretty engaged the entire time.
Sure, sure.
Which with a show like this, that isn't necessarily geared to my demographic.
Mhm.
I thought they did a relatively good job uh, getting my demographic and a younger demographic hopefully engaged as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think my attention wasn't held as well during this first episode. I definitely wasn't necessarily ready for that long of a runtime for an animated feature.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was going to be 40 minutes tops, actually. So
Yeah, and so having such a long runtime didn't necessarily like count against it, but it wasn't something I was expecting. And um, I don't have as much of a familiarity with the Clone Wars animated series, and I wasn't aware that that might be a thing I should have knowledge on moving into this show. And so that was the thing that I feel kind of that I kind of hold against it a little bit. Um, I know that like if you're a fan of Star Wars, you'll understand most of what's going on here, but in regards to like having any sort of knowledge from the Clone Wars, it certainly doesn't hurt from what I can tell, because there's a lot of characters I think that we're going to see down the road. Even these first two episodes, there are a number of characters that were involved in Clone Wars at some point
yeah.
that were
Well,
um,
even the opening of the show, it starts off with Star Wars Clone Wars, and then it kind of like burns away to show the Bad Batch.
right.
And then they have the same narrator from the Clone Wars narrate the beginning of this episode, which kind of makes sense to me because technically at the beginning of the show it is still the Clone Wars. Like we're in the Clone Wars. But
Mhm.
then in the second episode they didn't have that sort of fade away and they didn't have the same narrator again. So I think it is sort of like a transition away from that
Mhm.
era to this new era. But as someone who did watch the Clone Wars, though it was like several years ago now, I did kind of rewatch some of the like Ahsoka episodes when she showed up
Mhm.
on Mandalorian again.
Sure.
And I watched the season 7 when that came out for the Clone Wars last year, which especially those last 4 episodes were excellent. I don't know if you've seen those, Matt, but I would
Mhm.
definitely watch those if you haven't. They're really good.
Sure.
Um, I've lost my train of thought.
Ahsoka episodes, Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's gone. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. But no, like I think the show has a good has a strong starting point. The characters of the Bad Batch, although tropes in and of themselves, and their names are literally derived from the trope themselves. It's like,
Yeah. I know
oh
every time I
hey,
see these characters too, I'm like, man, they spend a lot of time getting this makeup on their face.
right? I know.
Like
Well,
Crosshair has like the thing like over his eye. I'm like, is that a birthmark or did he like spend time in the mirror this morning putting that on?
right. That's kind of what I was curious about, because even Hunter, like, is that face paint that Hunter's wearing, or is that like a scar or a birthmark or
Yeah,
something? Like, because it'd be awfully goddamn convenient for the guy named Crosshair to have a literal crosshair over one of his eyes,
yeah,
and for him to actually be a pretty good shot on top of that. So,
yeah. I mean, so he was genetically engineered apparently to be a really good shot. Like that was his thing.
mhm.
But I do think it'd be a little bit too convenient if he just had like a weird birthmark of unless they
Right.
like did that. Maybe it was like they branded him or something so they could, I don't know.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. It's like the more you think about it, the worse it gets,
Well,
I
I mean, it's
think.
branding. It's branding. Like you want when you sell the action figures, you want kind of want that, that to
Right.
be on there. And
Like
kids
here's
kids
that
like
would be
it.
kind of funny if like the whole Bad Batch like toy line for Disney was just like slightly different looking versions of the clones, like not even like as they are now, just like, oh, here's Crosshair. And it's just like he has like a yellow spot on his armor or something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he looks identical. Same with the rest of them. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it is really cool how much how many stories they got out of essentially like one character. Like it's just
mhm.
one character, all voiced by this D. Bradley Baker guy, but played by the actor. I can't remember his name. The New Zealand actor who plays Django and Boba.
Oh, yes, yes.
But it's just crazy, like how many like stories in the Star Wars universe are based around that one dude,
Mhm.
essentially, like just getting cloned over and over again.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and I guess that kind of leads into the conversation about, the new female character that they add to the show, which, I mean, I guess I'm going to throw obvious spoiler tag on this. Like, if you
yeah. I
haven't
mean, I
seen
don't
these
even think
episodes,
you don't need like this show so far. Like, there's no spoilers.
no, I
Everything they showed
mean,
is in the trailers, and I don't know. Like, there's not. I don't think there's anyone out there who's like, no, Bad Batch. You better not spoil this up for me.
right. I
But
feel
I could
like
be wrong.
yeah, right. I feel like you might be surprised at how stupid some people can be.
Yeah,
Uh, but like, obviously, they introduce Omega. She's a female girl a young girl that's on Camino during the first episode, and she has a fascination with the Bad Batch. Uh, and it's pretty clear early on that she is a clone, but much in the way that the Bad Batch are genetically deviant, Omega is a woman, or is a girl, rather than being the typical boy that the clone troopers are based off of directly. Um, so it's definitely an interesting development. Um, I don't know necessarily how to feel about her yet, because as I was discussing earlier on before the podcast started, children in cinema and in just like in media in general are not a thing that I generally enjoy, with a few exceptions. Avatar: The Last Airbender and Stranger Things immediately come to mind. One example of animated and one of live action, and that, like, all of those characters are near and dear to my heart in one way or another, and they're all like child actors, or you know portrayals of children. And perhaps Omega will capture my heart in the same way, but I tend to just not enjoy storylines focused on like a singular kid or a group of kids. It tends to
yeah.
not be a thing I like very much. So
Well, and I know we talked about this before too, but I do think that I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I thought they actually did a pretty good job on the show of not making her too annoying.
mhm,
I mean, she didn't like, as much as like people love the Clone Wars. Ahsoka was pretty annoying at the beginning of that show,
mhm,
and people love her now. And even Ezra was pretty freaking annoying at the beginning of Rebels, and
mhm.
now people are like excited for him to get introduced in live action, which apparently he's been. There's rumors he's been cast as the actor that played Aladdin in the new live action Aladdin, which good for him. But yeah, I thought overall she was okay. Like I wasn't too annoyed by her, and I said, I mean, I think as far as these shows are concerned, I think like Ahsoka, both
Mhm.
Ahsoka and Ezra weren't really that interesting. They didn't really have an air of mystery about them when they're first introduced.
Sure.
But this character does. Like I do think she has some sort of force sensitivity,
Mhm.
just based on her interaction with Crosshair when she said, I really like that dialogue. I thought it was pretty interesting when she said, "This isn't your fault." Like, I don't remember the exact wordage, but I don't something about that. Like she
Mhm.
knew something was going on with him, and she forgave him for that, for his transgression, because she knew he didn't have any control of it, and I appreciated that about her character.
Mhm.
And I think when she shot Cross hair cross man, I that word I for some reason I want to say crossfire every time. Crosshair, I keep thinking of like a hair like on my head.
Right.
I don't know why. But anyways, when she shoots him, the first time she uses the blaster, she's able to shoot him, and they're all like, "Whoa, how did you do that?" And she's
Uh,
like, "I don't know, I never shot this before." I
mhm.
honestly think they're hinting at something more there. And then there was some sort of comment like, "Well, the Caminos don't, or the Kaminoans or whatever they're called.
Yeah, no, I have a hard time
They
with that too.
yeah
The
they
cloners.
the cloner people, they said essentially they don't clone something, or they don't do something for no reason. So there's clearly something going on with her character, uh,
Mhm.
and I do think it has something to do with the Force, which could tie into like Palpatine getting cloned or Baby Yoda. There's been rumors Baby Yoda might be on the show. Um, personally, I don't really. I mean, that's fine, but I'm not really that interested in that whole aspect of it. Like, I just think it's kind of cool that she does have those powers, and I think that could be interesting going forward. But that's kind of what make you wonder, like,
Hmm.
what her story is going to be, because the Empire doesn't really want Force sensitive people around that aren't
Right.
Sith. But
Yeah, no, I agree that like I think clearly she was brought in for a reason, and like what the cloners, the yeah the Kimonans, yeah, the cloners. I'm gonna stick with the cloners.
the cloners,
Um,
the
yeah,
cloner aliens,
yeah, the
along the giraffe people.
people of Camino.
Yeah,
They clearly created her for some objective. Whether what that objective is, we don't know yet, and obviously it's going to be a big mystery of the show. Um, I My spin foil hat theory at this juncture, to make a very far fetched and not like factually based information at all, um, was that Omega as a character is like secretly going to be Emilia Clarke's character from Solo. Um, and literally my whole theory, or the supporting fact supporting that theory, is just that she's blonde right now, and Emilia Clarke, in the instances I've seen her,
yeah.
uh, were
Well,
originally blonde.
that's what I
So
say too, because like I don't think she's blonde in Solo. I don't think she is,
no, I don't think she is either. It's
and
been
she
a minute
definitely
since I've.
has a British accent,
Mhm.
right? And I think the girl has a New Zealand accent. I'm pretty sure, just because like like the actor that plays like Django and all the clones, he's from New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting.
he's a Maori, if I'm saying that right too. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
But yeah, that's kind of, and I'm also just trying to like create a, I don't know, like a
yeah.
connected
No, I
narrative in
mean I
that way.
like it, Matt. You're thinking outside the box. I don't know if I buy it yet, but like, I
Right?
mean,
Yeah.
if that happens, I will give you props, because that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, because it would be a cool connection, just because the timing of it is right. Because like age wise, she's young enough to where Han starts going on his adventures, that like they would be about the right age for
Yeah,
that. So
I would like to see them make more connections to that movie, because I
mhm,
like Corellia, though we got a glimpse of it, I don't really feel like we got to know it that well. So I'd like to sort of see it explored just a little
mhm.
bit more.
No,
I mean,
I totally.
that whole situation was weird to begin with. Like, Star Wars has a weird thing with accents. I'm like, well, why do all these kids have different accents? Why does Han Solo have like American accent, and his girlfriend just have British accent?
Hmm.
But I don't know, it's fine. It's
Yeah,
Star Wars.
right. It's Star Wars.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the original charm of Star Wars was how campy it was, right?
Oh
And
yeah. Hmm.
although a lot of that campiness is kind of, at least campiness in terms of production value, has faded away, because now Star Wars has billions of dollars going into it now. Um, that like now the campiness has leaked into other parts of the media, and so that is like
Yeah.
the actors and their accents. It's like, oh, whatever, like, you're from where, whatever, just talk like you normally do.
Well, I know there
Like
was
they,
like it's weird because like the actor that played oh man, I'm terrible with names sometimes. I shouldn't be, but in Rogue One, the main villain was Australian.
mhm.
And there was like a big deal in Australia. They're like, finally, we have representation. There's a character with an Australian accent in Star Wars. So somewhere there's a space Australia with space
There's a
kangaroos and
space
stuff.
Australia.
Yeah,
Space kangaroos. I love that
yeah,
idea.
yeah. I just remember when Bill Burr was on, on The Mandalorian. They're like, yeah, sometimes there's space Boston.
Right. Yeah, somewhere there's a space Boston.
Yeah,
But
you should
yeah,
do some
no.
more impressions of Bill Burr because you're really good at that. Yeah,
Yeah, no, like I I don't know. I'll be curious to see where they go with the show. The first episode I thought was a pretty good um introduction to the Bad Batch and the characters. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the tropes that they're going with, but it is just what it is.
Yeah.
I'm thinking particularly of Wrecker, like the big dumb strong one. Like it sounds like
Yeah.
a Patrick Star impersonator. Like I'm not a
No,
huge fan
this is
of.
bad. This is a question. No, this is... Man, I totally fucked this. No, this is Patrick. Oh, it's a giraffe.
This
You
is a
remember that?
load of barnacles. Yeah.
Oh,
No.
it's a giraffe.
Such a rat. Oh shit.
I don't have the greatest Patrick impression.
That's
if you
amazing
can't
though.
tell. Yeah.
But no, yeah, like he's just a big strong character, so they made him the big dumb character too. Like it's just been done 1,000 times. So like
Yeah.
I'll try and forgive it of that. But
Yeah, the way I agree with you 100% in a lot of ways, but at the same time, like I'm okay with it. I think
Mhm.
all of them are like tropes for the most part, but for some
Mhm.
reason, Wrecker is just more transparently a trope than the other ones.
Yeah, he's the lovable idiot. And that's
Yeah,
kind of like what
he's like the he's the character that kids are supposed to laugh at.
yeah,
Like
100%.
that's
Yeah.
why he's there, you know. Um, I know, like I was gonna say, like my biggest complaint of anything, it's not even really a complaint, was that the character that looked evil or the clone that looked evil turned out to be like the evil one. And
Right.
I actually really I like Crosshair. I think he's kind of cool. I
Mhm.
like his weird voice. It's like kind of like higher pitched and nasally than the other ones, and they're all voiced by the
Mhm.
same actor, D. Bradley Baker. You can see it on the screen right now. But
Yeah.
um, and like I told Matt, no one's gonna know this show, but Beast Wars, like I was obsessed with it as a kid, and he kind of has like that same sort of cadence as
Mhm.
Tarantulas did.
Right. Kind of conniving and
Yeah, I just like, and I kind of wish, like I wish the evil character, the character that looks evil, wasn't the evil one. I think it would
mhm.
have been maybe like a little bit more interesting if one of the other ones was the one that betrayed them, just because they're clearly like they don't look like they're evil. You know, like Wrecker doesn't look that way. The nerdy one
Mhm.
doesn't look that way. I always forget about like the mechanical one, the
Oh, Echo.
Echo. Yeah, because I don't know what his powers are. I assume he can interface with
I
machines.
mean, yeah, he's not technically like
Yeah,
genetically deviant like the others are. He's
right.
just mostly machine now.
Well, and
And
like that was explored in season 7 of the Clone Wars, but honestly, like that episode, I fell asleep during. I just couldn't concentrate on it. I wasn't engaged, but um, yeah, I mean, compared to what I saw the Bad Batch and the Clone Wars season 7, because that's where they first got introduced. Like this show, I thought has made them way more compelling, specifically with Hunter's character, at least so far.
yeah, I will say that yeah, like I think all of they all are charming in their own way, and I have enjoyed the show thus far. Um, as I described before we started recording, we do kind of a brainstorm session before we start recording the podcast of kind of what we're going to talk about generally. But yeah, the second episode of the show felt like more of a this part of the show was definitely something they just needed to get out of the way. And it's something that every story regarding like the rough mercenary group suddenly having a child in their midst happens. And kind of like, oh well, we're gonna send you off with this nice family because well, you need that. You're a child. You need that. And the kid's like, but I don't want that. I want to stay with you guys. And they're like, oh, well, all right, if you put it that way. And then the child stays with the murderous band of outlaws. And it's all just peaches and gravy from there. And so that's what this entire episode was. And I would have rather them just skip the baloney BS, like family bullshit story and just be like, oh, well, she wants to stay with us. So we're going to do that. Oh, let's go
Yeah,
on an adventure, like rather than have to go through the rigmarole of this episode.
Yeah, I'll say what I told you earlier. Like I feel like I'm okay with that storyline. It doesn't it's been done way more compelling other places, obviously. Like
Hmm.
even on like some of Disney Plus's other programming, like I think it's actually done I think that storyline is done the best in like sports movies. Like I really actually enjoy like the new Mighty Ducks show and also The Big Shot with John Stamos. Because
Hmm.
in both of those shows, they have like sort of like kind of grumpy old men that kind of get convinced to like help out.
Hmm.
But in this case, it's sort of a sort of similar situation where you have like a group of like grumpy mercenaries that don't really want this kid around,
Hmm.
um, but there wasn't really that much resistance to the kid being there to begin with. Like there was some resistance, obviously, but like it wasn't like as an audience member, I wasn't sitting there like, oh man, I just wish they would accept her and like let her join their group. Like there was a
Right.
little bit of that, but it wasn't like I wasn't. It wasn't like a cathartic moment where I'm like, oh man, she gets sorry, where she gets to like join the group and be a part of the team. Like I didn't really have a catharsis in that, but
Hmm.
I do agree with you that there is a little bit of like I felt like this storyline sort of needed to get out of the way.
Hmm.
A little bit like it needed to be uh sussed out a little bit because it was set up in the first episode.
Yeah.
Um and they did. I think it was set up. It wasn't like the most compelling way to handle it, but uh I did like that they brought in the one of the clones from the old Clone Wars into it. I thought that was a good addition.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I liked it for what I liked the first episode quite a bit more than the second for what it's worth.
Agreed.
But
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I think I will say that I'm glad that they got this episode out of the way, or just this part of the narrative out of the way as early as they've done now. Because now they have a lot more like interesting things to do. Like they can start to develop Omega as a character to be a part of the team in some way. Um, that will be more interesting than just being the tag along kid character. And I know that's what happens literally every time with any of these storylines. With like, oh, the kid character becomes useful over time because that's how life works. But
yeah. Well, I mean,
um,
and it does. I mean, like Ahsoka, who was like reviled by the Star Wars community, like everyone hated her, and I think
mhm,
rightly so. Like in a lot of ways, they're like, why are they putting this kiddie character? Like this
mhm,
is stupid. I mean, and you have to remember, like when Clone Wars first came out, people hated it too because they're like, well, like they already had animated the Clone Wars, and that was really good. And now I feel like George Lucas is like kind of hopping on and being like, oh no, I want to make my own version. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. But like people hated Ahsoka to begin with, but now she's like
mhm,
loved by
right.
like the whole community. Like she is absolutely adored. And again, rightly so. She's a really good character because you like literally see her grow up and
Mhm,
become like a Jedi who's just like really like powerful. And she also has that cool like bird owl creature following her that's like the light side of the force, I think. And it's just like such a cool like
mhm,
wandering like samurai sort of I don't know. Like they did a really good job with her. And Ezra coming back too. Like people are like he was annoying to begin with too, but now people like love him and they're excited to see him back in live action. So
mhm,
there's something to that. I think I don't know. Like I'm a big Stephen King fan,
sure.
and I know for Stephen King, like you have like the way he writes characters, like it's just like by brute force of like spending a crap ton of time with them. Like The Stand is my favorite book of all time, and
Uh-huh.
that book's like incredibly long. And the only reason why I end up liking all the characters is because like he forces me to spend time with them, and it's always
Yeah.
like it's kind of the same way with like a lot of these Star Wars cartoon shows, like
Mhm.
Ahsoka. Like I didn't really like her, but now I'm like I have like Stockholm syndrome. Like now I do. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'll be, and honestly, I would welcome that. Like, I want to
yeah.
like Omega.
I want to throw this out before I forget. Before we get
Yeah.
to it's the same with Anakin Skywalker actually, because people
Mhm.
despise that character, but now he's like coming back to the new Obi-Wan show with the same actor as Hayden Christensen. People were like
Mhm.
ecstatic about it. I'm like, everyone hated this guy. Like no one liked him, but now like it's been like 20 years since those movies came out or whatever it is. Like now
Mhm.
people are like I'm the same way though. Like I don't know what it is. It's just super exciting to see that character again. You know, you never think you're gonna see him again, but there he is. Anyway.
Yeah, no, no, I totally agree. Like, I think that's the case with any like nerdy fandom of any production or property
It's
is
just so
that
noticeable in Star Wars. It's just so
yeah,
noticeable.
well, yeah, with Star Wars, I think Star Wars is like the best example of that in so many ways because like I feel like there are only a few examples of characters who have remained reviled or like are
Don't bad
characters that
mouth Jar Jar.
I will 100% badmouth Jar Jar. Like that motherfucker is annoying as hell. He's never been that funny or interesting. He just was put
I
in
liked
for
him as a kid, Matt. I
like
liked him as a kid.
I
So
did not even I just didn't care for him ever. And as an adult, I dislike him even less or dislike him even more. And so, but yeah, like additions like Jar Jar and things like that, notwithstanding, like generally speaking, when it gets brought into Star Wars, it's going to become a beloved thing at some point for one reason or another. Like, I don't think anyone like loves the Star Wars Christmas special because it's a fantastic piece of media. It's absolute garbage fire tier in terms of quality, but like it's a campy part of the history of Star Wars. So like you love it because it's part of the story now. Like it's part of the ongoing narrative of like of people's experience with Star Wars. And that's the case with Jar Jar, that's the case with Anakin, Ahsoka, and
mm.
maybe Omega will, for now, perhaps not be very much liked by people, grumpy old men like me, but perhaps will be enjoyed later on down the road because they do a good job with her character.
I do feel like I noticed a noticeable uptick in May the 4th posts on my Facebook wall this year.
Oh
I,
yeah,
I don't know what it is. I just thought I noticed a lot more. So it's become
well,
like a thing. Like people know about it.
I think if I were to speak for my own experiences, I think that Rise of Skywalker put kind of a bad taste in people's mouths, or at least like hardcore fans.
Oh yeah, for
It
sure.
kind of put a bad taste in
Well, the
people's mouths
sequel
for Star
trilogy,
Wars.
especially yeah, Last Jedi and or the man, the Last
Yeah,
Jedi,
Rise
the
of
Skywalker one. Yeah,
yeah, Rise of Skywalker. Like those movies like were very very polarizing for Star Wars fans. And so when Mandalorian came around and we got our first taste of that, I think a
yeah.
lot of people had a renewed interest in Star
Me
Wars.
included, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, like Mandalorian was fantastic compared to the
yeah,
movies of, from which this media came from. And so
yeah.
I
Totally,
think
100% agree with that. Yeah,
and so that resurgence I think is partially like the May the 4th this year, like Mandalorian put Star Wars back on the map a little bit in terms
for
of at
sure,
least general
for
acceptance.
sure.
And
Yeah,
so
that show is so good. Like they did
mhm,
like just every aspect of it. I mean, obviously, like there's some episodes that are better than others, but just
mhm,
the concept behind it, with the baby Yoda thing, like that thing's so cute. And you think like the
mhm,
risk they actually had to take to include something like that,
yeah,
like that's pretty interesting. And then like I actually really like the character of the Mandalorian as well.
right.
Din Djarin, I believe his name is.
Mhm.
For some reason, I always want to say Djinn, like he's like a genie or something. But
He's a
it's just
genie.
like Din
Mhm,
Djarin. But yeah, like that's such a good, and like the inclusion of like Bill Burr in Star Wars and
mhm.
why am I forgetting this guy's name right now? Uh, he's like the kind of like the merchant on the main planet. He's like an 80s action hero from like Predator. Oh, it's driving me crazy.
Oh shoot, no, I know exactly who
I
you're
don't
talking
like I
about.
love that. Carl Weathers. I love
Carl
Carl
Weathers, yeah,
Weathers.
yeah.
I love the guy. Like I'm so excited he's in Star Wars. Like that's so awesome.
Hmm.
So that's just
Oh
like
yeah.
excites me. And I love The Mandalorian. It's such an interesting show. And like I know people are like so excited to see Luke Skywalker. in that final episode, and I think that really got people like so excited that they would do that, and I totally get it. Like, I think for me, like, if we're gonna go there,
Uh-huh.
if we want to talk about this a little bit, I don't know, like
Sure.
what you thought about that. But at the time, I was kind of like, I don't know if I really like this because he looks so weird. Like, it doesn't look like a real person, and it kind of took me out of the scene a little bit. But
Wait, which character
as
now?
time has gone by, I've kind of softened to it and been more like, yeah, it's really cool. But I actually think the episodes leading up to that last episode were what made me really like it. Like the one with Bill Burr was really good.
Mm-hmm.
The one with Ahsoka, that was so good. That was my favorite episode ever of that show. I really love that one.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Well, and like Rosario Dawson is she's such a great actress. I've really enjoyed her in a lot of the Marvel content I've seen her in. Um, and so to see her take on such a beloved
she
role
did a
in
good job
Star
of it
Wars,
too. Like
yeah.
she actually like has like the same facial expressions. And I think what really sold me actually was that they brought in some of the music beats from like her theme
Mm-hmm.
during some points of that episode. I'm gonna watch the episode after we're done with this actually because
That's
I
cool.
like it that much. But yeah, like it definitely there's definitely some emotional. I felt emotional more during that episode than I did during the Luke Skywalker one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly enough. But I think in a way too, like I'm kind of like in a weird generation thing where like I'm actually weirdly more connected in some regards to like the prequel trilogy. Because I
Sure.
was a kid when those movies came out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean I still love the originals. Those are the first ones I saw, like growing up, but like I was more like I was during
Mm-hmm.
that time where like episode one came out and I loved episode one. Like I loved that movie when I was a kid. And I
Sure.
was so excited when episode two came out. Like I was there the night it came out because I wanted to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was definitely during that generation where I was like, I love the prequel. Like I actually really didn't like episode two when it came out. Like even I was smart enough, I guess, to know that. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, no, like we are a part of the same generation that like got to see the prequel movies in theaters, you know. And like we were not part of that generation that got to see the original Star Wars trilogy in theaters.
technically I did see them in, well, I saw sort of because they re-released them when I was really
Yeah, the
little.
re-release, but like the
Yeah,
original theatrical release though, like
yeah,
that's kind of a cool bragging right, you know.
yeah.
And we get the prequels in that regard and the sequel trilogy, but like that's nothing quite to the original. And so, but yeah, no, I totally have that fondness for the prequels in that way too. Like they're not really good movies. Like, you know, you could go into like whatever, you know, argument you want with Star Wars fans about the prequel trilogies, but
Our
not the
prequel
prequel.
memes has really done a done a service
Yeah,
on.
no, like I think there's a lot. I mean, I know that this people might hate me for this opinion. Narratively speaking, the Clone Wars trilogy, like the prequel trilogy, makes way more sense than the sequel trilogy, like hands down.
Like more sense, or it's more like
More sense. Yeah, like
interesting.
just
Huh.
like following from beat to beat. I think that the prequel trilogy does a way better job of having a narrative that makes some level of sense, whereas the narrative of the sequel
Oh,
trilogy,
sorry. I get what you're saying. So the sequel trilogy, like seven, eight, nine.
yeah, seven, eight,
Okay,
nine,
sorry.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like thinking the original for some reason. I agree with you actually. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like I just think that like the prequel story might not be as grandiose or good, but the sequel trilogy certainly I think does a bad job of telling a
What the
story
prequel
and
trilogy did incredibly well,
mhm,
I think, was world building.
yes,
And
100% yes.
yeah, because like when those movies came out, they expanded the Star Wars like universe,
Hmm.
like the mythology of it. Like I'm not saying it is like the best ever, but like they did a really good job like expanding like the Jedi lore and the Sith lore. They
Hmm.
just did a really good, like you guys remember before that the I don't even think the word Sith was it even mentioned in the original trilogy. I don't think it was. I think that was
I
all
don't
like
think
prequel
so.
stuff.
Yeah.
I could be wrong though, so don't
But
don't
no,
like
yeah,
get too
like
mad at me. But yeah, a lot of that stuff wasn't like around that much. Like the
mhm,
whole concept of like a Jedi and his Padawan, like it was around, but when you think of like the original trilogy, they didn't have any of that stuff in it really.
no.
Like they had like Luke and Yoda and like Luke and Obi-Wan, but it wasn't like that same dynamic. You when you think of a Padawan and his master, I
Mhm,
don't think of the original trilogy. I think of like what was going on in the prequels
for
for
sure.
sure. Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like the prequels did a lot of things wrong, but I think a lot of modern Star Wars
mm.
and how good it has become has to give thanks to the prequels for setting that up.
I mean,
And
I mean, just think about it. Like George Lucas made the original, he made the prequels. Like
mhm,
both those film series, what they have in common is excellent world building.
yeah, and
In
yeah,
the sequel trilogy, he wasn't involved with, and I think you can tell in that
yeah,
regard.
no, 100%. And but yeah, no, I will say I'm excited for. That was my turn for my dog to shake out. Um, but yeah, like it's I'm excited to see more of the Bad Batch. Like I want to like it more. I don't know how in love with it I might become. Um I don't know. I don't see myself like really falling madly in love with the show, but I do see myself having a greater appreciation for it down the road. Um, we'll just have to kind of
Yeah.
wait and see
Well,
what
with all
happens.
these animated Dave Filoni animated shows, it always
Hmm.
takes time for them to get going.
Sure.
And as far as this show is concerned, I think it actually had a pretty strong opening compared to the other two that he's been really involved in. Like, I think Resistance he was involved with, but I don't think it was at the same extent as I could be wrong, but I don't think it was the same extent as Rebels and the Clone Wars.
Sure.
But he really, I mean, even in Rebels, he tried to. There's some stuff he did in that show where like he really expanded the universe in that, and Dave Filoni did in Rebels
Hmm.
actually. Like the Bendu and like the weird world between worlds situation.
Hmm.
I still hold that the season 2 finale of Rebels, that's like some of the best Star Wars content out there. It's just so good. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it because it's good. It's the first time that Ahsoka sees Anakin and what he's become as Darth Vader, and it's
Ooh.
it's about as cool as you would imagine. They did a really good job with it. And Darth Maul's in it a lot, and I'm really engaged by Darth Maul's character. I think he's really interesting, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of also really interesting interplay between Ezra and Kanan. Because Ezra in that show, he's kind of flirting with the dark side a little bit at that point, with Darth Maul trying to make Ezra his Padawan or
Sure.
whatever it is with the Sith. I don't even know if Darth Maul won't even consider himself a Sith at that point. I don't think,
Yeah.
but he wants to take him on as like his student, and
Hmm.
like Kanan's trying to keep Ezra as his student. So it's just a really good episode. And there's also something that happens to Kanan that is pretty big for the show going forward. And yeah,
Hmm.
so I would, if you have not seen any Rebel episodes, I would definitely watch that one. And then in the next season after that, they bring in Thrawn. Thrawn. They bring in Thrawn, which
Oh
is
yeah, that's right.
they did a good job with him too. Actually, I think they did a pretty good job with Thrawn. They're really good with enemies in that show, for the most part. So
For the most part.
yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if I
No.
really ever got like the Inquisitor stuff, but
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah. No. I'll. I might have to check out some of the Clone Wars stuff because I
I
definitely have
just
missed out on a lot of that.
Yeah, just watched season 2 finale of that show. It's on Disney
Mhm.
Plus. The season 3 finale, I believe, is also really good. It's almost has like a Game of Thrones battle sort of feeling about it, if I
Hmm.
recall.
That's cool.
Yeah, and there's stakes in it. Like there are characters that will die. You know, um,
Hmm.
several of them die throughout the series. So it starts off really childish, but it gets better. And the animation's nowhere near Clone Wars, which is disappointing. But
Right. Now I'll probably. I think my plan will be to maybe catch up on some of that Clone Wars stuff, some of those episodes you mentioned, and then I think I might go back and actually watch that miniseries of the Clone Wars, like the original Clone Wars miniseries,
oh
with
yeah,
that
that's
really
on
cool.
Disney. I watched the first, like they have the
Hmm.
two of them on there. Like
Yeah.
they released the first series of shorts as one like long
Yeah.
kind of movie thing, and I
Hmm.
rewatched that the other day because
It's
I'm a
just such
nerd
a
like that.
cool because like
Yeah,
the same guys behind like Samurai Jack were
yeah. And that new
uh
show where he has like a caveman and there's like a velociraptor or something. Do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I think that like that
I
animation
think
style is just really cool
say
and
Genry Tazaski or something like that is the guy. But
ooh, I don't know his name off the top of my head.
yeah, it's something like that. I think he actually might be behind like Dexter's Laboratory too. I could be wrong though.
That's cool.
I mean, it's not like we don't have the power of the internet here to check it out.
Samurai. Samurai from the ancient past wielding a magic sword.
But that's another thing. If you've not seen the
Mhm.
original, the Clone Wars animated show,
Mhm.
freaking watch that show. It is amazing. Jendi Tartarovsky is his name.
Yeah, he that like that animation style is just so unique and like
Yeah.
that some of the coolest lightsaber battles ever like in Star Wars I think come from that miniseries.
Yep,
Like
he is behind Dexter's Laboratory as well. Just
yeah,
so you know.
that's too
And
funny.
Primal was the name of that show that I was thinking of.
Primal, okay.
Yeah.
But well, I think we've pretty sufficiently covered our opinions on the first two episodes of The Bad Batch. Would you say so, sir?
Yeah. Do you want to have you thought about giving a grade, Matt? We don't usually grade stuff, but why not?
Oh god. Okay. What kind of scale do we want? Are we doing like 5 with
I don't know.
point like decimal values, or are we doing like a solid number between 1 and 10?
It's weird. Like I always feel like when I grade it like on a F to A scale, I always give it
Mhm.
like a better grade than I would if I was like doing it like
Yeah,
1 to 10,
let's
Um,
do numerical 1 through 10 with you can do a decimal if you want, but only a half value.
why you have to make sure I'm not doing more than that?
Yep.
Are you worried
Because
I'm gonna do
if
like
I hear a
9.62?
grade of 7.32, I'm going to throw a roll at you.
You're all the way in Austin. You can't hit me.
You underestimate my power.
I have the high ground, Anakin.
Pretty sure you have the high ground on me. I'm down freaking Texas.
I mean, I don't think Portland has that high. I don't know though. That's a good
But
question.
yeah, what's the grade? If you had to give it a grade on these two episodes, what would it be?
So it's 1 to 10, right? That's what we're going
Yep.
with.
1 to 10 with half values if you want.
So the first episode, I would like I actually thought it was a pretty strong opening, and gonna give it an 8 out of 10 actually, because again, like I always like struggle with that because I'm like, well, it could be like a 7.5, but I think it deserves better than a C,
Mhm.
especially as an opening grade. So I'm gonna give it 80% strong B, or I guess that's a B minus, but I'm gonna consider it a B. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10. I thought it was a good opening. It set up the stakes pretty well. There's a few things I wish it would have done a little bit more differently, but it's also a child show. So
Right.
I'm gonna go, like if I was gonna do it, I would like maybe make Crosshair not the evil one. I
Mhm.
think it would be a little bit more engaging if the evil looking character wasn't it turned out to be evil.
Right.
Uh, but I mean, also he's hunting them. I think Crosshair is probably like if I'm getting sidetracked, but if anyone's going to be like voting or hunting them down, of any of the gang, I think Crosshair is
Mhm.
definitely the more intimidating one.
Sure.
Because like the idea of a sniper, I think is kind of a terrifying idea. If I was
Mhm.
gonna like grade the second episode, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Because if I go down to 6 out of 10, I feel like a D doesn't sound right to me. I think
Mhm.
it's still good, and I think it functions perfectly fine, but I think it
Sure.
could have been like I'm thinking like if I was going to compare it to something else, I think it maybe could have been done a little bit more
Mhm.
like with more subverting my expectations in a good way. I know that's like kind of like seen as a bad thing these days of subverting expectations is sort of like a negative, but I think
Right.
it could have maybe subverted my expectations more, or at least been done in a way that I'm like achieve more of a catharsis when they accepted her as a full member of the team.
Sure.
So I'm gonna say 8 out of 10 for the first, 7 out of 10 for the second.
Oh man, I guess if I were to do two separate gradings, episode one, I'd give I'd do a 7 out of 10. It was just fine. It was a good starter to the show, but I've definitely seen stronger openings, especially if we're going to compare this again. Like, you have to compare this to other stuff on Disney Plus. And if we're going Star Wars, then look no further than The Mandalorian. That first episode just like punches you in the throat. It was like, go ready for some Star Wars, motherfucker. And like, it's just so awesome. This episode, or this first episode of this show, is kind of like, oh, well, I mean, clones, Star Wars. So a solid 7 out of 10. And then episode two is a 5 out of 10 for me, for sure. I'm tired of this trope. It's baloney. It's been done 1,000 times. I don't care if you're
It's
making your show for children, like, get better, do more creative things. Like, you have an entire universe of characters to be able to play with and do what you want. You have Disney Plus, just like, fuck you money, like, just do
yeah,
what you want with it. And so,
yeah. I always want to say at the end of this stuff too, like I do enjoy I like where it's set in the timeline, but like Star Wars is such a huge universe. You can, like you said, you can do anything with it. Like you can go into the way far distant past, you can go into the far distant future. You
mhm,
can, like, why are we always like focused on this like little slice of history that though is pretty interesting? We've seen it like done so many times. But don't get me wrong, I still really like it, but
mhm,
like I would think it'd be really cool if they like set like a story during like the old Republic times,
mhm,
or even like the High Republic. I know people hate that, but I like when they like expand stuff like that. I think it's really cool. Like I like when
mhm.
they that we're not just focused on this one little piece of time.
Right.
I don't really like the sequel trilogy era because I think it's kind of like I said, it doesn't have great world building. So I'm not those movies are kind of I don't we're not going to get into it, but they were a cluster F. Like they weren't, to me
Yeah.
they were the prequels. To me, granted I grew up with them, but I still feel like the world building made it personal for me, like it made me interested. But the sequel trilogy, the world building was crap. Like I know
Mhm.
nothing about that world. It didn't make any sense when you actually sat down and thought about like it didn't make any sense. Like if you thought like that, like the
Uh-huh.
politics of that world didn't make any sense to me. Um, or
Yeah.
the yeah. Anyway, we don't have to talk about that. But yeah, or like set it in the way like there was these Star Wars comics by Dark Horse. They were like Star Wars Legacy. I don't think people like them very much, but I like them. It was like Luke Skywalker, or I don't know if it was Luke Skywalker's descendant, but it was like he was a Skywalker descendant, and he was kind of had this dark side, light side battle going on in himself, and actually had like Darth Krayt, I believe, who was a character all the way back
Mhm.
from the Clone Wars. I believe he was like I think he was a Tusken Raider originally. I could be wrong
Mhm.
though. But yeah, like I think it'd be, and in my opinion, I think maybe they're like holding back on expanding that stuff for now because they have plans in the future and they don't kind of want to like shoot their shot all at one time.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think I don't know. I would love to see like a show set in the old Republic times or High Republic or in the far future. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully at some point we'll be able to get that. At what juncture, I don't know. Yeah, they do seem hesitant to go that direction, but
Well, I know
um,
like one of the new shows coming out is called I think Star Wars. I want to say Symbiote. No, that doesn't sound right. Anyways, it's set during the High Republic
mhm,
era, which it's sort of like I think the show sort of is about uh like the emergence of like the Sith back into the universe after the High Republic time. So then you find out kind of how like Darth Sidious essentially came to be with with his whole thing with I think his master's name was Plagueis. But that's I think the show's sort
mhm.
of supposed to be about that, which I think is kind of fascinating. So we'll see how that plays out. But
But yeah, no, I'll be excited to see. I do want more Star Wars in my life. I just hope that I want more Mandalorian versus more
yeah,
Bad Batch at this
you can
juncture.
tell
But
I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. I'm sure by
yeah.
watching this. Like I love Star Wars. I would say Star Wars. If I was gonna name like my favorite universe, like I was thinking about this the other day, like what my favorite universe would be. Like
Mhm.
it might be the Star Wars. There's a few others that I really love too, but I'm really engaged by Star Wars. it's always been my favorite growing up. So
And I'm sure we could fill another podcast worth with this information. However, today
yeah,
we will be wrapping up our opinions here on Bad Batch episodes 1 and 2. I do look forward to discussing more Star Wars with you in the future, sir. But for today, we will be bringing this episode of the Nerds of the North podcast to a close. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I've been promising for several weeks now, we're going to be making these available for someone to listen to at some point. So look forward to the discourse,
yeah. I
especially
mean,
on Star Wars.
they all are available, just not. We haven't been promoting them for what it's worth. But.
Yeah, so we'll be getting there soon. We look
And then
forward
we
to
also
all the
want
internet
Matt to show
battles.
his face at some point here.
Yeah, we'll be getting some face cams going here sooner rather than later. You could look at our
Yeah,
charming faces as we make wrong opinions on all things media. So
yeah. We'll maybe get a better background than just like a random door, right?
right, yeah, I'd like 2 random doors.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? Oh, okay. I get what's going on now. All right.
But with that, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Bye, everyone.